Welcome to the Limelight podcast, where authors, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders step forward to share their ideas, stories, and strategies. I'm Clarissa Burt, inviting you into thoughtful dialogue, refined insight, and an esteemed way of living. Everybody, it's Clarissa Burt here. We are back in the limelight, and today I have another really extraordinary entrepreneur and author who has written a book that I really couldn't wait to get her on, because I think especially for women, let's say of a certain age, right? Married women of a certain age, potentially, not only, but ask themselves this question very frequently. And my guest is someone that wrote a book. I want to show you the book. It is called Gray Divorce: My Life Rewritten by Ann L. Smith. And here she is. Hey, Ann, good morning.
Hello.
Good to see you. I'm going to read a few things, and I love the fact that you talk about rewriting your life and how you hold the pen. No matter where you live, no matter where you are in life, you're raising your children, you're watching them leave home, or you're standing on the edge of retirement. The decision to stay and fight for a relationship or walk away and start over can feel unbearably heavy. The stories may differ, but the outcome is often the same. In unhealthy relationships, we slowly lose sight of who we are. And then the question becomes, how do we find our way back? Wow. Talk about opening up. That's a lot. There's a lot going on there. And especially for women who have been in relationships, as we said before, as we were saying in the introduction, for years and years, 20, 30, sometimes 40 years, and realizing that, the growth just wasn't the same on both sides, right? And I think that's what to say. You talk in your book about, and you're wanting to have a partner, a relationship, a physical relationship, not having to be the relationship be all one-sided, not to be just a paycheck and security for someone. So why don't you open up the dance for us a little bit and tell us your story, and I'm assuming what prompted you to write the book.
Sure. The book didn't start out as a book. It just started out as me working through a lot of different things and journaling. I journaled for many years, and like a lot of things, I had lost that in the chaos of the life that I was living. And so the journaling picked back up again after I separated and I was working towards the divorce. But I was married for 29 years. We were together for 30. And it really, you just get in this, kind of get on the treadmill. You just get on the treadmill, you're raising kids, you're working, you're not really necessarily paying attention to what's truly going on. And when your subconscious starts to try to speak up, you're like, not now, I'm too busy, or that can't really be what's going on. And for me, it was really after a move to the West Coast that had been planned for several years that I started to see the true cracks that were in the relationship, and really started to question, is this it? Is this really the best life that I can be living? Because I've lost sight of who I am, where I'm going. I have a lot of things that I still want to accomplish. So is this going to get me where I need to be? And that's when I really started to make some pretty big questions, pose some pretty big questions to myself.
Yeah. One of your bullet points here is when avoidance becomes survival. I think that's what you're just intimating right now is, I'll put it away. I'll just, I'll think about it later. I can't do it right now. I got too much going on. I've got to clean, empty the dishwasher, or, fold the washer, along those lines. And it's not an easy thing to affront. Coming to it, the end. I mean, it's pretty earth-shattering, I would imagine, right? For you, for him, for the family, for the kids, for all. And then you have to take a look and say, is it me? Am I being selfish? Am I being centered? So I think then there's that whole guilt path that one goes down. Speak to that.
Yes, absolutely. All of those things that you said, all of those run on a constant stream of thought in your head. What will people think? What will my kids think? My grandkids, my friends, all of that, and the guilt. How can I be considering this? What's wrong with me? There was a lot of what's wrong with me comments that were on play as well. And I think that's survival. That's just survival. We don't want to face the difficult questions because it takes holding up the mirror and being willing to answer what we're really thinking about, what we're feeling, and we don't want to acknowledge those feelings. It's easier for us to just pretend that we're not feeling those things.
So when you decided, I'm going to affront this, how did you affront it? When you decided, okay, I'm making the move, how did you, friends, books, groups, faith, family, what were your next steps in order to start bringing this to the fore and making the moves forward?
I started by trying to find a therapist who could help me work through the jumble of emotions that I was facing. And after a few sessions, I realized it just was not a good match for a variety of reasons. And then I feel like the universe put a course on Daily Om in front of me. It was called Separating with Grace and Respect. I don't believe it's out there anymore. The author of that course was Regina Michaels, and that course was a total game changer for me. And it did not assume either way that you were going to separate or stay. It let you do the work and the answers yourself. But that was really the catalyst for me to start to face those things. And then I started having conversations. I was having conversations first with my sister, and then with a handful of very close friends. And that was really an interesting thing for me, because I felt like I had hidden all of this from everybody. But as I started having the conversations, they were like, no, we knew things weren't well for a long time. We just assumed you were okay with it.
Wow. Okay. So you didn't have to really state the case more than just I'm unhappy and I need to do something about it.
Right. Yeah.
Awesome. So you talk about red flags. Is that a red flag when failing to recognize red flags is a boundaries issue? Can you explain?
Sure. So I did not grow up with boundaries. Boundaries were not allowed. And we just, I was being raised as a good Southern woman, and Southern women just don't have boundaries. You're there to take care of everybody else.
Sure.
And I just didn't realize until I started doing the work with ultimately a fabulous therapist, the role that boundaries had. And boundaries are all about being true to yourself and not losing yourself when you're loving someone else. Yeah. You can give everything, but you still have to remain true to yourself. Sure. And so when we ignore red flags, it is basically allowing a behavior that someone is demonstrating that is not in our best interest. And a very dear friend has told me for many years, we teach people how to treat us. And that's what ignoring red flags is really all about. We're teaching someone else, it's okay, you can behave like that, I'll tolerate it. And that's how it ties to boundaries.
Right. The domino effect, you say self-beliefs that drive unhealthy relationships. There are many of those. Which ones were the ones that you were experiencing?
So for me, it got down to a couple of different things. One was that I had grown up being a fixer. And one of the life lessons that I learned was that being a fixer is not an identity. It is a trauma response. Mm-hmm. And that's not who you want to be. You don't want to be a fixer. We have responsibility for our own lives. We can offer to help other people, but we should not take on their burden and their baggage and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So the trauma response, being a fixer, not a good thing. That's not where you want to be in your life.
You also talk about the lessons that moved you forward. So we can talk about when life throws a curveball, and many of those come along too. I mean, we can hear all day on life's curveballs, but what were the lessons that you think moved you forward? I'm curious.
That I am a whole person on my own. We don't do anybody any service or any good raising our kids to believe that someday you will find your other half. You're not half a person, you are a whole person. So that was a big thing for me. Another big thing was recognizing that when we fail to do the deep inner work to heal ourselves, we put ourselves at risk of making the same mistakes over and over again. So the work is not easy and it's ongoing. It's kind of like dieting. You're never really done. you always have to stay, consistent with your behaviors and your patterns. And so you have to do the deep work to really heal yourself. Otherwise, you're at risk of continuing to make the same mistakes over and over again with relationships.
Without a doubt. Absolutely. You talk also here about how to plan for and have difficult conversation. Already you've had the conversations, I'm assuming, with the family and your friends or whomever you went to and you didn't get pushback from, which was great to hear. But dun, 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 now you have to have the conversation with your husband. So tell how did you, prepare yourself for that? And ultimately, it must have worked out because I'm pretty sure you're not together anymore.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
But just kind of walk us through the preparation and the conversation.
That was a lot of what that course really helped with is what is it that you want to say? What is it that you want to make sure the person hears? And when I go back and I look at my journal notes as I was working through that course, it's really interesting now, hindsight's always crystal clear. It's really interesting now to look at those and realize that I was spending all of my time and all of my effort being concerned about how he was going to receive this information and no consideration to how I was feeling and what I needed for myself. So I still hadn't made that switch, that flip yet. But I got very clear with what I needed to say. And at the end of the day, I felt how I felt. I had made a number of attempts down through the years to be heard and to express how I was feeling. And it never went anywhere. So I had to let go of the fact that this conversation was not going to move mountains. It wasn't going to affect him in any way, shape, or form. I really didn't know how he was going to respond, actually, because we had been pretty much just roommates for a number of years.
Do you think he was expecting it, or was it just out of the blue?
The way he reacted, I don't know. He was just like, okay, and that was it. So I think it just spoke to the fact that we were very, very disconnected at that point.
Right. How did you feel after that? And I asked the question because I want women that are kind of in that. I know someone else that's in this position, and how do you feel after the conversation? Is it like, oh my God, I just did it. I just opened that door, and now I'm about to open that other one. And I don't. Do you prepare for what's next beforehand, or did you prepare kind of like, I'm just going to jump off the cliff and the net will appear?
I was preparing a lot beforehand. I had already had a conversation with a realtor about putting the home up for sale that we owned together and looking for something else and what was realistic. I didn't want to be a slave to my mortgage. I was very concerned about basically starting over again at 60 at that point. So I had done a lot of preparation. I had done a lot of research. To answer your question, I felt a huge relief when that conversation was done. Also a little bit of fear, but it was a positive fear. It was like, whew, that's done. Okay, now I can really start focusing on what I need to focus on. Right. And that's when I really started to be like, it's not my responsibility how he feels. Right. It's not my responsibility where he has to go, how he has to live. I have to take care of me.
Right. And so taking care of you and taking full responsibility for yourself, obviously we talked about the preparation and you talked to a realtor, but the finances come into play as well. I think that's where a lot of women get tripped up and get really, really nervous because that doesn't always go so smoothly. Right. Yeah. So because there's going to be, that's kind of where, let's say the rubber hits the road when we start talking about this is yours and that is mine. And I want the sewing machine and I want the vacuum cleaner and all of those kinds of things can become very uncomfortable and unfortunate because I remember when my parents went through the divorce and, it was just an awful thing to watch. So how does one prepare without prenups, obviously? Really, our generation never knew what a prenup was, never heard of it.
Right. Yeah.
How do you suggest that women start to prepare financially?
I strongly encourage everyone to have a conversation with somebody who's got a financial background, who's removed from the situation, not a good friend, somebody that's neutral, somebody who can help you start to ask and answer the questions for yourself. What do you really want? What do you really need? there's all kinds of experts that you can have access to. And yes, it may cost a little bit of money to have those conversations, but not that much initially, right? You can have a conversation with a financial consultant. You can even have a conversation typically with an attorney initially for very little. It's not until you actually get into something where you may have to start. My ex and I were able to do it ourselves. We did not get attorneys involved, but I did have conversations with people who helped me plan for what do I need to do. And I think you have to get really clear on, is this something that I feel like I need, or am I back? Am I trying to get something that I feel like I earned out of this relationship? So you have to get really clear about what is the most important thing for you at that point. And I personally have known people who have basically just walked away from everything because they felt like that was the most liberating thing they could do for themselves. So it is possible. It just depends on where people are.
I'm doing a lot, the paperwork, for example, you take his last name. Right. Yeah. So I mean, some women undo that. And then of course it's like your driver's license. It's all the things, right?
Yes.
Take some time and effort, and that gets to be a little frustrating. But listen, if you really want out, I think the point is, if you really want out, you will find a way. It doesn't always have to be tragic. It doesn't always have to be difficult. Hopefully, there are two adults coming to the table, much like in your case. But that is not always the truth. So, I would like it if you would say how long has it been that you've had the separation or the divorce from your husband, and how has life been in these years from the beginning until now?
So we separated in September of 22, and the divorce was final the following spring, early April of 23. Right. And immediately after the separation, I just had this overwhelming sense of peace. I was at peace with myself. I just kind of fell in love with being on my own and finding, rediscovering who I was at that point. Right. So it was a huge celebration really for me at where I was. And then just a lot of work and a lot of discovery. And I spent a year with a therapist and did an incredible amount of work on that. And honestly, I was very happy being by myself. I didn't need to have anybody else in my life. I fortunately could support myself financially. I've worked for many years. And so I knew I could support myself financially. But it wasn't until I started thinking about, retiring at that point within a few years that I thought I had always wanted to travel. Yeah. And yes, we can travel by ourselves, but
it's also that if you tack into some women's groups also that are in the same position, that could be fun. But yes, going alone is fabulous.
Yes, you can do that. There's all different ways of traveling. For me, I wanted to have somebody to share those experiences with. And so that was really the only reason why I started thinking about, how do I even find somebody else at this point? I haven't dated in over 30 years. At that point, I was living in a small coastal town of about 10,000 people. I worked remotely. I don't drink. I don't go to church. Where was I going to find somebody?
Right.
Yeah. And so I started doing some research about online dating. I actually took a course that I got so much more out of. I talk about that in the book too, just because it really helped with getting clear about who I wanted in my life.
Can we name the course? Would you mind naming the course, so just in case someone would like to follow suit?
Sure. It's called Your Last Love, and it's by Natalie Kita, Kita.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a fabulous course. And I learned so much. And I think really the dovetail of the work that I did in that course with the therapy that I had done, I got very crystal clear with who I wanted in my life. And I actually just got remarried in October.
I know. I was getting to that. Girl, you didn't waste any time.
I was shocked. I was shocked that it happened that quickly.
I'm going to go for a little while. I'm going to find myself. Then I'm going to write a book, and then I'm going to find my man. I just love that. I love it.
Yeah. And I look back now on how I even look at pictures of myself from 2021 and 2022, I look miserable. In every picture I see of myself, I look miserable. And I think about how much my life has changed since then.
Yeah.
And look, I'm not here telling people that they have to get divorced.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, don't stay stuck. If you're unhappy and you feel like your marriage can be saved, then work on it together.
Oh yeah,
right?
This was never about advocating for divorce. This is about
Absolutely.
advocating for happiness and for your peace and for your mental well-being, emotional
Absolutely.
well-being. So, Anne, I can't thank you enough for being here. The last question, and I do want to just remind everybody about Grave Divorce. Here we are, everyone. What a beautiful cover, by the way. I absolutely love
Thank you.
It's gorgeous. And this is, again, My Life Rewritten by Anne L. Smith.
Yes.
Where can people find the book?
It is on Amazon, and also there's a link to Amazon from my webpage too, annlsmith.com.
Great. The last question that I normally ask people, and I'd love to ask you too. You cannot say husband and you cannot say children. That is never going to be, and they're fabulous, don't get me wrong, but cannot be the answer. Up until now, Anne, what would you say has been your crowning moment?
Getting that book published. I have talked about wanting to write for years, and I kept putting that dream aside, and I finally focused on getting that done, and I'm thrilled, absolutely thrilled.
You saw it come through.
Yeah.
I know. I same thing happened to me. When the book showed up at it was a party. I mean, it was really something to celebrate. Something really to celebrate. Life is something really to celebrate, and we can't spend one day miserable. So that's our message, I think, for our audience today. And thank you again so much for being with us. You stay right there while I say goodbye and give everybody an appointment. Till the next time.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the In the Limelight podcast, intelligent media for the savvy entrepreneur. You'll find my video interviews on YouTube and clarissaburt.com, and the audio version of the interviews you can get wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to connect with me on social, pretty much anywhere, and do stay well until we meet again in the Limelight.